Louisa May Alcott pressed her forehead against the cold hospital window, watching rain streak down the glass like tears. She no longer had the energy to cry. Inside the room behind her, her younger brother Timothy slept fitfully, his 12-year-old face pale against the white pillows. The machine surrounding his bed beeped steadily, each sound a reminder of how much money she did not have. The doctors had been clear. Timothy needed surgery within 3 months or his heart condition would become fatal. The cost was staggering, more than Louisa could earn in 5 years of working her 3 jobs. She was a waitress at a diner during breakfast hours, a bookstore clerk in the afternoons, and cleaned offices at night. Her body ached constantly, her hands rough from work, her eyes circled with exhaustion. But none of it mattered because she was still tens of thousands short of what Timothy needed. Their parents had died in a car accident 2 years ago, leaving Louisa as Timothy's only guardian. At 23, she had given up her college dreams, her social life, everything to keep them afloat. But now she was drowning. Timothy would go down with her unless a miracle happened. The miracle came in the most unexpected form. Mr. Harrison appeared at the diner where Louisa worked the morning shift. He was a distinguished man in his 50s, wearing an expensive suit that looked out of place among the worn booths and chipped coffee mugs. He waited patiently until her shift ended, then approached her with a business card. "Miss Alcott, I represent a client who may have a solution to your financial difficulties," said in a measured tone that suggested he did this sort of thing regularly. Louisa's first instinct was to refuse. She had learned that nothing in life came free, especially not solutions to impossible problems. But Mr. Harrison mentioned a sum of money that made her knees weak. It was exactly what she needed for Timothy's surgery, plus enough to secure his future care. "What would I have to do?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Marry my client," Mr. Harrison replied simply. "It would be a contract marriage lasting 1 year. At the end of that period, you would receive the full payment and be free to divorce if you choose. My client has his reasons for needing a wife, and you have your reasons for needing money. It is a business arrangement, nothing more." Louisa stared at him, certain she had misheard. Marry a stranger for money? That sounds like something from a Victorian novel. Mr. Harrison smiled slightly. "My client is Julian Whitmore. Perhaps you have heard of him." Everyone had heard of Julian Whitmore. He was the tech genius who had revolutionized social media platforms before he turned 30. Now at 35, he was worth billions and appeared regularly in business magazines. Louisa had seen his photograph once, a striking man with intense dark eyes and a serious expression that suggested he rarely smiled. "Why would someone like him need to buy a wife?" Louisa asked, suspicion creeping into her voice. "That is for him to explain if you agree to meet him." Mr. Harrison said, "I can only tell you that the offer is legitimate, the contract legally binding, and the payment guaranteed. You would save your brother's life, Miss Alcott. Is that not worth at least hearing the full proposal?" 3 days later, Louisa found herself in the back of a luxury car, driving toward an address in the most exclusive neighborhood in the city. She wore her only good dress, a simple navy blue that she had bought for her mother's funeral. Her hands trembled slightly as she clutched her small purse. The house that appeared at the end of a long trailing driveway was not what she expected. Instead of a cold, modern mansion, it was a beautiful stone estate with ivy growing up the walls and gardens that looked like they belonged in a fairy tale. The door was opened by a kind-faced woman who introduced herself as Mrs. Chun, the housekeeper. "Mr. Whitmore is waiting for you in the library," Mrs. Chun said warmly, leading Louisa through halls decorated with art and filled with the scent of fresh flowers. Julian Whitmore stood when she entered, and Louisa felt her breath catch. He was taller than she had imagined, with broad shoulders and the kind of presence that filled a room. His dark hair was slightly disheveled, as if he had been running his hands through it, and his eyes studied her with an intensity that made her feel exposed. "Miss Alcott," he said, his voice deep and surprisingly gentle. "Thank you for coming. Please sit down." Louisa perched on the edge of an antique chair while Julian remained standing, hands in his pockets, looking almost uncomfortable. "I suppose you want to know why I'm doing this," he began. "The truth is complicated, but I will try to be honest. 5 years ago, I was engaged to be married. Her name was Catherine, and I thought she loved me. I learned later that she only loved my money. When I discovered she was already married to someone else and had been planning to divorce him once she secured her position with me, it destroyed something in me. Trust, perhaps, or faith in relationships. He paused, his jaw tightening with old pain. Since then, I have avoided romantic entanglements entirely. But my business now requires certain social appearances. Investors, partners, and clients expect a man in my position to be settled, married, stable, without a wife. I face constant speculation about my personal life, invasive questions, and worst of all, women who approach me with ulterior motives. I need a wife who has no interest in my money beyond what we agree upon contractually. Someone honest. Someone like you. Louisa absorbed this, trying to understand. But there must be other women who need money. Why me specifically? Because Mr. Harrison did extensive research, Julian replied. You work 3 jobs to care for your brother. You have no debt beyond medical bills. You have never been arrested, never been involved in scandals, never even had a serious boyfriend, according to our investigation. You are exactly what you appear to be, a good person in a terrible situation. That is rare in my world. The contract was presented to her then, thick with legal language that Mr. Harrison patiently explained. She would marry Julian in a private ceremony. She would live in his home for 1 year, appearing with him at necessary social events. She would receive the full payment for Timothy's surgery immediately upon signing, plus a monthly allowance. After 1 year, they could divorce quietly. She would receive an additional substantial sum. There was one clause that made Louis's cheeks burn. The marriage will not be consummated unless both parties explicitly agree. You will have separate bedrooms and complete privacy. Are we? Julian noticed her reaction. Did I want to be very clear, Miss Alcott? I am not buying you. I am hiring you for a role like an actress in a play. Whatever happened to you before the contract, whatever happens after, and whatever does not happen during it, that is entirely your choice always. Something in his voice, a kind of fierce sincerity, made Louisa believe him. This was not a predator. This was a wounded man trying to protect himself the only way he knew how. I will do it, she said quietly. For Timothy, the wedding happened 4 days later in Julian's garden with only Mr. Harrison and Mrs. Chun as witnesses. Louisa wore a simple white dress that Mrs. Chun had somehow procured in her exact size. Julian wore a dark suit and looked at her with an expression she could not quite read as they exchanged vows that felt both meaningless and terrifying in their weight. When the judge said Julian could kiss his bride, he merely brushed his lips against her forehead. A gesture so gentle it made her eyes sting with unexpected emotion. That night, Louisa stood in the bedroom that had been prepared for her, a space larger and more luxurious than anywhere she had ever slept. She heard a soft knock on the door connecting her room to Julian's and froze. May I come in? Julian's voice came through the door. I promise, just to talk. Louisa opened the door to find him standing there in casual clothes, looking younger and less intimidating than before. I wanted to make sure you were comfortable, he said, staying carefully in the doorway. And to tell you that Timothy's surgery has been scheduled for next week. The hospital has confirmed they received payment in full, plus funds for his recovery care and future medical needs. Tears spilled down Louisa's cheeks before she could stop them. Thank you, she whispered. You have no idea what this means. I think I do, Julian said softly. Loss is something I understand very well. The difference is you get to save someone you love. That is worth more than any amount of money. He turned to leave, then paused. Louisa, I know this is strange and awkward, but I want you to know that while you are here, this is your home, too, not a prison. You can go anywhere, do anything you like. The only thing I ask is that you tell me if you are unhappy or uncomfortable. Can you do that? Louisa nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Good night, then, Julian said with a small smile that transformed his serious face. Sleep well, Mrs. Whitmore. As his door closed softly behind him, Louisa realized with a start that she had just married one of the richest men in the country, and he had left her completely alone on their wedding night, not because he did not want her, but because he respected her enough to keep his word. It was in that moment that Louisa May Alcott began to wonder if perhaps she had misjudged what this year would hold. The morning after her wedding, Louisa awoke to sunlight streaming through curtains she had forgotten to close. For a confused moment, she could not remember where she was. Then memory crashed back like a wave. The contract, the ceremony, Julian Whitmore. She sat up quickly, half expecting to find it had all been a vivid dream born of exhaustion and desperation. But the luxury bedroom was real. The comfortable bed was real, and the soft knock on her door was definitely real. "Come in," she called, pulling the covers up instinctively. Mrs. Chen entered with a warm smile, carrying a tray. "Good morning, Mrs. Whitmore. I thought you might like breakfast in your room today." Given everything that happened yesterday, Mr. Whitmore has already left for his office, but he asked me to tell you that a driver is available whenever you want to visit your brother at the hospital. Mrs. Whitmore. The name sounded foreign to Louisa's ears. She accepted the tray, amazed at the perfectly prepared food. Fresh fruit, warm pastries, eggs cooked exactly how she liked them, though she had never told anyone her preference. "How did you know?" she asked, gesturing at the eggs. Mrs. Chen's smile widened. "Mr. Whitmore is very thorough in his research. He wanted to make sure you felt at home." After eating, Louisa did visit Timothy, finding him already stronger knowing that surgery was coming soon. She held his hand and told him a carefully edited version of the truth that she had married someone who could help them, that everything was going to be all right now. Timothy, too young to understand the complexity of the situation, simply hugged her tight and told her he was glad she would not have to work so hard anymore. Returning to Julian's estate that evening, Louisa felt strange entering the house. Was she supposed to wait in her room? Explore. She found herself wandering the halls until she stumbled upon a room she had not seen before, a library that took her breath away, shelves stretched from floor to ceiling filled with thousands of books. In the center sat comfortable chairs and a fireplace that crackled with warmth. "I thought you might find this eventually." Julian's voice came from one of the chairs. Startling her, he stood, setting aside the book he had been reading. He wore jeans and a sweater, looking nothing like the billionaire businessman from news articles. He looked almost approachable. "I did not mean to intrude," Louisa said quickly. "You are not intruding. This is your home now, remember?" He gestured to the shelves. "Do you like to read?" "I used to," Louisa admitted before everything happened with Timothy. "I have not had time in so long." "Then make time now," Julian said simply. "Any book here is yours to read. In fact, I insist. A house this size needs people living in it, not just occupying space." Over the following weeks, a strange routine developed. Julian worked long hours, but they ate dinner together most evenings. At first, the meals were silent and awkward, but gradually they began to talk. Julian asked about Timothy, about Louisa's interrupted college plans, about what she wanted for her future. She found herself asking about his work, his travels, the books in his library. "Why technology?" she asked one night over dessert. "Why not something else?" Julian considered the question seriously. "Because technology is honest. It does what you program it to do. Unlike people, it does not lie or pretend to be something it is not. There is comfort in that predictability." Louisa heard the hurt beneath his words. "Catherine really damaged you, did not she?" His eyes met hers, surprised by her directness. "Yes, she taught me that I could not trust my own judgment about people, that love was just a tool others used to get what they wanted." "That is a sad way to live," Louisa said softly. "Never trusting anyone," says the woman who married a stranger for money, Julian pointed out. But there was no cruelty in his tone, almost amusement. "I married a stranger to save my brother," Louisa corrected. "And I was honest about my reasons. You knew exactly what you were getting." "That is true," Julian acknowledged. "You have been refreshingly straightforward." "I appreciate that." It was during Timothy's surgery that their relationship shifted. Louisa sat in the hospital waiting room for 6 hours, her hands clenched together, barely breathing. She had not expected Julian to come, had not even told him which hospital or when the surgery would be, but somehow he appeared halfway through, settling into the chair beside her without a word. "You did not have to come," she said, her voice rough from unshed tears. I know, he replied, but I thought you might not want to be alone. When the surgeon finally emerged to say Timothy's surgery had been successful, Louisa burst into tears of relief. Without thinking, she turned and buried her face in Julian's shoulder. His arms came around her immediately, holding her as she sobbed out months of fear and stress. He said nothing, just held her one hand, gently stroking her hair until the storm passed. "Thank you," she whispered when she finally pulled away embarrassed. "I did not mean to fall apart on you. Saved your brother's life today," Julian said quietly. "You are allowed to fall apart." After that day, something changed between them. The walls came down slightly on both sides. They started watching movies together in the evenings. Julian taught Louisa how to play chess, laughing when she proved to be a quick learner who beat him on her 5th try. She introduced him to her favorite classic novels, reading passages aloud while he listened with unexpected interest. "You have a beautiful voice," he said one evening as she finished a chapter. "I could listen to you read for hours." Louisa looked up to find him watching her with an expression that made her heart skip. It was not the cold, distant gaze of a business partner. It was something warmer, something that made her nervous and excited all at once. Their first public event as a married couple was a charity gala. Julian's stylist arrived to help Louisa prepare, transforming her into someone she barely recognized. The midnight blue dress hugged her curves. Her hair was styled in elegant waves. In jewelry that probably costs more than her old apartment glittered at her throat and wrists. When she descended the stairs, Julian stopped mid-conversation with Mr. Harrison, his eyes widening. "You look stunning," he said, and there was no pretense in his voice, just honest appreciation. At the gala, they played their roles perfectly. Julian kept a protective hand at the small of Louisa's back as they circulated through the crowd. She smiled and made polite conversation, letting him introduce her as his wife, but there were moments when the act felt less like acting. When Julian laughed at something, she whispered the sound genuine and unguarded. When their eyes met across the room and he excused himself from his conversation to return to her side, when they danced together and his hand tightened on her waist, pulling her just a fraction closer. "You are very good at this," he murmured as they swayed to the music. "At pretending?" Louisa asked. "At making it not feel like pretending," Julian admitted, his voice low enough that only she could hear. Driving home that night, they sat in companionable silence until Julian spoke. "Louisa, I need to tell you something. This arrangement, this contract between us, it is starting to feel complicated," her heart hammered. "Complicated how?" "I am finding it difficult to remember that this is supposed to be temporary," he said carefully. "That you are here because I am paying you, not because you choose to be." Louisa turned to look at his profile in the dim light of the car. What if it is not that simple anymore? What if I am starting to stay for reasons that have nothing to do with the contract? Julian's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Are you saying what I think you are saying?" "I am saying that I look forward to dinner with you every night," Louisa said, her voice trembling slightly. "That I find myself listening for your footsteps in the hall. That when you smile, really smile, it makes me happy in a way I did not expect. I am saying that this does not feel like a business arrangement anymore. At least not to me." Julian pulled the car over to the side of the road, turning to face her fully. "I have been fighting this for weeks," he admitted, "telling myself it would be wrong to develop real feelings for you when you only agreed to this because you were desperate. That would make me no better than Catherine using the power imbalance between us." "You are nothing like Catherine," Louisa said firmly. "She lied to you. I am telling you the truth. I am falling for you, Julian Whitmore, and I do not know how to stop or even if I want to." For a long moment, they stared at each other in the darkness of the car. Then Julian reached out and cooped her face gently in his hand.
Out.
"I am falling for you, too," he whispered. "God, help me that I am falling so hard." When he kissed her, it was nothing like the brief touch at their wedding. This kiss was deep and real, full of all the emotion they had been holding back. Louisa's hands found his hair as she kissed him back. And for the first time in 5 years, Julian Whitmore let himself believe that maybe, just maybe, love could be trusted after all. They arrived home that night, Not as business partners fulfilling a contract, but as two people who had found something neither of them had been looking for, something real, something worth fighting for. The morning after their first real kiss, Louisa woke with butterflies in her stomach. Everything had changed, yet nothing had changed. The contract still existed. The year still had to be completed, and Julian still carried the scars of his past, but now they had admitted feelings that made the situation infinitely more complicated. She found Julian in the kitchen making coffee with a concentration that suggested he was as nervous as she was. When he saw her, his serious expression melted into a smile that transformed his entire face. "Good morning," he said softly. "I was hoping last night was not a dream." "Definitely not a dream," Louisa replied, accepting the coffee cup he offered. Their fingers brushed, and the contact sent electricity through her. "We should talk about this," Julian said, gesturing between them about what it means for the contract, for your future, for everything. They settled at the kitchen table, and Louisa noticed that Julian chose the seat next to her instead of across from her, as if he could not bear to put distance between them anymore. "The contract says 1 year," Julian began, "but I need you to know that you are free to leave any time with full payment. What happened between us last night does not obligate you to anything." "What if I do not want to leave?" Louisa asked. "What if I want to see where this goes?" Hope flickered in Julian's eyes. "Then we take it slowly till we get to know each other properly without the pressure of the contract hanging over us. At the end of the year, you decide whether you want to stay for real. Not for money, not because of any agreement, but because you choose to." It sounded perfect. But Louisa heard the fear beneath his words. He was terrified that she would leave, that this would turn out to be another betrayal. She reached for his hand, lacing their fingers together. "Julian, I have already made my choice," she said gently. "I am staying, because I want to. Yes, originally I came here for Timothy, but somewhere between chess games and library conversations and you showing up at the hospital, everything changed." "You changed everything." Julian lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. "You have no idea how much I needed to hear that." The next few weeks were the happiest either of them could remember. They went on real dates, discovering each other, without the pretense of the contract. Julian took Louisa to art galleries and fancy restaurants, but she also took him to the diner where she used to work, to the bookstore where she had spent countless afternoons showing him pieces of her old life. Timothy's recovery progressed beautifully, and Julian visited him often, bringing books and games, building a relationship with a boy who meant everything to Louisa. "He talks about you constantly," Louisa told Julian one evening. "You know, he thinks you were the coolest person in the world." Julian looked genuinely touched. "He is a great kid. You did an amazing job raising him." But their happiness was not destined to remain unchallenged. The threat came from an unexpected source. Gregory Nash, a business rival of Julian's, who had been trying to acquire Julian's company for years. Gregory somehow learned about the contract marriage and threatened to expose it to the media unless Julian sold his company. "If the world learns you bought a wife for business appearances, your reputation will be destroyed," Gregory said during a confrontation in Julian's office that Louisa accidentally overheard. "Investors will flee. Partners will cancel contracts. Your empire will crumble." Julian's voice was ice-cold in response. "Get out of my office, Gregory. I am not selling, and I am not afraid of you." After Gregory left, Louisa found Julian standing by the window, tension radiating from every line of his body. "Did I heard?" she said quietly. "What are we going to do?" "We are not doing anything," Julian replied firmly. "I will handle this. I will not let you be dragged through a scandal because of my business problems." "It is not just your problem anymore," Louisa argued. "We are in this together, remember?" The situation came to a head at a major business conference where Julian was scheduled to speak. Gregory had planted reporters ready to ambush Julian with questions about his marriage. Louisa, attending as Julian's wife, saw the trap being set and made a decision. When the reporters approached with their invasive questions, insinuating that the marriage was fake, Louisa did something that shocked everyone, including Julian. She stepped forward and spoke with absolute conviction. "I am going to tell you the truth," she said, her voice clear and strong. "Yes, Julian and I married quickly. Yes, it was unconventional. But I want you to understand something. This man who you are trying to paint as cold and calculating has shown me more kindness, more respect, more genuine care than anyone in my life. He saved my brother's life when we had nowhere else to turn. He made no demands, set no conditions, and has been nothing but honorable. So yes, our marriage began as a contract. But it has become real, because Julian Whitmore is real. He is not the heartless businessman you think he is. He is the man I fell in love with. The room fell silent. Julian stared at her shock, and something deeper, something like awe written across his face. A reporter called out, "Are you saying you love him?" Louisa turned to look directly at Julian. "Yes, I love him. That was not part of the contract, but it is the absolute truth." Later, in the privacy of the car driving home, Julian finally found his voice. "You did not have to do that. You did not have to expose yourself like that." "Yes, I did," Louisa said firmly. "Because what Gregory was trying to do was wrong. And because it was time, I stopped hiding how I feel." Julian pulled the car over for the second time in their relationship. But this time, when he kissed her, it was different. It was a kiss of promise, of commitment, of a future they would build together. "I love you, too," he said against her lips. "I've been too afraid to say it, but I love you, Louisa. Not the woman I hired, but the woman you are. The woman who reads to me, who beats me at chess, who makes me laugh, who saved her brother through sheer determination. I love all of you." Tears streamed down Louisa's face as she kissed him back, pouring all her emotion into the connection between them. The scandal that Gregory had hoped to create never materialized. Instead, the story of a man who had helped someone in desperate need, and the love that had grown from that kindness captured public imagination. Julian's reputation, if anything, improved. Investors saw him as more human, more trustworthy. His company thrived. On the anniversary of their contract marriage, Julian arranged a surprise for Louisa. He took her back to the garden where they had first married, but this time it was transformed with lights and flowers. Timothy was there, healthy and grinning. Mrs. Chun dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. Mr. Harrison stood by with a new contract. "I want to tear up the old contract," Julian said, taking both of Louis's hands in his, "and replace it with something real. Louisa May Alcott Whitmore, will you marry me again? Not for money, not for appearances, but because I love you and cannot imagine my life without you." He dropped to one knee, pulling out a ring that was nothing like the practical band she wore. Now, this one was unique, beautiful, with stones that caught the light like captured stars. "Yes," Louisa said through happy tears. "Yes, 1,000 times. Yes, they married again in that garden. But this time, every word meant something. This time when Julian kissed his bride, it was not a brief formal touch, but a real kiss that spoke of love, commitment, and a future they would build together by choice, not contract. Timothy hugged them both, thrilled to have a brother-in-law he already adored. Mrs. Chun bustled about, making sure everything was perfect. And as the sun set over the garden where their strange story had begun, Julian and Louisa stood together. Two people who had started as strangers and become soulmates. "And oh," Louisa said softly as they swayed to music in their first dance as a truly married couple. "When I signed that contract, I thought I was selling my freedom. And now," Julian asked, holding her close. "Now I know I was buying my future," Louisa replied. "A future with you?" Julian smiled, that rare, genuine smile that she had worked so hard to earn. "I was the one who got the better deal in this arrangement. You gave me something I thought I had lost forever, the ability to trust, to love, to hope as they kissed under the stars, surrounded by the people who love them." Both Julian and Louisa understood that sometimes the best love stories do not begin with love at all. Sometimes they begin with desperation, with contracts, with impossible circumstances. But when two people are brave enough to be honest, vulnerable, and real with each other, those circumstances can transform into something beautiful. Their story was not conventional. It was not what either of them had planned, but it was theirs, and it was real, and that made it perfect. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this story. If you enjoyed this content, don't forget click like, share the story with your friends and family, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on more meaningful stories.